The ongoing Israeli siege of the Gaza Strip has made life even more impossible for the people of that enclave. This amid fresh warnings by international organizations. Our correspondent has this story.
Years of tight Israeli and Egyptian blockade of Gaza have left scars in all aspects of life in the Strip. Filippo Grandi, the Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, said that the problems faced by the Gaza are not just humanitarian, but encompass every aspect of society. Mr. Grandi also expressed concern over UNRWA's precarious financial situation, saying that schools and clinics in Gaza would be closed if donors failed to provide help. The agency provides education, healthcare, social services, and emergency aid to some 4.7 million Palestinian refugees living in Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, as well as in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
In Gaza, where the situation is very critical, it will affect the refugees more than any place. We have a deficit of $84 million.
UNRWA is funded almost entirely by voluntary contributions from member states. It requires $600 million a year to carry out its work, including in the education sector, where UNRWA employs 20,000 teachers, but its funding falls 20% of the amount needed. Last March, nations gathered in the Egyptian Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh pledged nearly $5 billion to help rebuild Gaza. However, they have failed to deliver on their promises, and there has been little reconstruction as building materials are still not allowed in.
This is part of the Zionist and American pressure in order to to force the Palestinians to accept any resolutions and to accept to go to the direct negotiations.
During the Gaza war, thousands of homes and many public structures were either reduced to rubble or severely damaged. More than 1,400 people, most of them civilians, were also killed. And although Israel allows more consumer goods into the territory, many people are still suffering from poverty, unemployment, lack of medicine and medical equipment.
This will further weaken both the economic situation and the services provided by the UNRWA to Palestinian refugees. Those refugees who are entirely dependent on UNRWA's aid will face catastrophic and critical conditions given they lost all other sources of income.
Adding to the misery of siege, loss of shelter and total destruction of livelihood, Palestinian refugees will have to worry about the further deprivation and suffering that the future may hold for them. Akram Saeed al-Satari, Press TV, Gaza.
Well, joining us now is Chris Doyle, the Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding from London. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Doyle. With all this report, we just broadcast one of them regarding the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza, with reports coming out of Gaza. Why do you think the Gaza blockade does not receive media attention in the West?
It receives media attention in fits and starts. There was certainly a lot of media attention at the time of the blockade at the end of May, but certainly you wouldn't have seen much coverage in the last few weeks. That, in a sense, is the nature of the news cycle. I think it's not so much the quantity, there is plenty of it, it's the quality that we are most troubled by. It doesn't really look at how life is affected by this blockade in the very same sort of way that a lot of the coverage doesn't really examine the day-to-day grind of life in the West Bank, which also, in a sense, is a series of blockades that are brought about by checkpoints and the wall and other obstacles to movement. So whilst there is coverage, it's simply just not of the quality that we would like.
Okay, and the humanitarian situation is deteriorating in Gaza. Why do you think the United Nations Security Council does not intervene to end the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza?
I think it's well known that the Security Council is pretty divided on this issue. The Americans have, for a very long time, backed the Israelis in pretty much all areas of their policy. Against that, there was obviously a lot of pressure on the Israelis to ease their blockade, which they've had, but it's well short of what the United Nations, aid agencies, and those who are genuinely concerned for Palestinians in Gaza know needs to happen, and that is the full and final ending of that blockade and the ending of the occupation. All you're seeing at the moment is a repackaging of the blockade to become more acceptable in the media, so that those items that appear to be so incredibly ridiculous are not being allowed in, such as pasta or pencils or children's clothes, are now allowed in. But the things that will really make a material difference to people's living standards, that is gas, fuel, water, clean water, construction materials, these are the things that are absolutely essential to take forward development in Gaza and for them to try to rebuild their lives after what has been an horrific 3 years of this blockade, which of course came on top of decades of occupation.
Okay, Mr. Chris Doyle, many thanks for your thoughts. That was Chris Doyle, Director of Council for Arab-British Understanding, joining us from London. Well, it's time now to take